Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cal here, and today I'm going to be starting off my 2022 off-season preview series. If you were around for last year, what I did was I went through every single team in reverse draft order, so starting with the team that was in the number 1 overall pick and finished with the team in the 32nd overall pick, i.e. who won the Super Bowl that year. And I just took a look at some of the players they had on the roster, and looked at what positions of need they need to upgrade and all that stuff. So I'm going to do a couple of things a little bit differently this year. It was a little bit confusing since I had projected starters, but what I did was I actually listed the highest cap hits for each position. So regardless of whether they're a starter or not, if like a backup had a higher cap hit than the starter, then I would list the starter, or the backup, I should say, as the starter. So in this section, I'm going to do largest cap hits per position, and I'm also going to acknowledge some other notable cap hits on the roster besides just the guys that would be in the quote-unquote starting spots. So without further ado, we're going to get into the Jaguars, who will be holding the number 1 overall pick for the second consecutive season after just a drama-filled disastrous season with Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence. Meyer, obviously, in particular, with all the publicity stunts and the bar scene and kicking the kicker and the stuff in the media, all that stuff. So he gets fired after just 1 year. His replacement is going to be veteran Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Pederson, who was fired in 2020 by the Eagles as a result of a power struggle between him and the general manager there. So he's had a year off, and we'll see what he can do if he can provide stability and leadership and a culture change that Jacksonville desperately needs. So getting on with their largest cap hits on offense at quarterback is going to be Lawrence, who was the number 1 overall pick last year. We knew it was coming for some time leading up to it. Pretty much ever since he set foot on Clemson, we knew he'd be the first overall pick, and it was a pretty disappointing first season for him. He dealt with some turnovers. What was most alarming was he didn't fare very well down the stretch. Like, he didn't get a lot of touchdowns at that point. So obviously, he'll look for larger improvement and maybe like more stability from Pederson will help with that. At running back, the largest cap hit belongs to Lawrence's college teammate Travis Etienne. Etienne was taken with the other first-round pick last year that the Jags had from the LA Rams as part of that Jalen Ramsey trade at the 2019 trade deadline. Etienne unfortunately missed all of last season with a Lisfranc injury that he suffered during the preseason. So they had James Robinson and Carlos Hyde last year at the running back position. Robinson's the starter. Unfortunately, he's going to be recovering from an Achilles tear, and Achilles injuries have typically been career enders for running backs. But the good news for him is that we're seeing Cam Akers of the Rams in the playoffs. He looks all right. So there is some hope there that Robinson can maybe return to form, given that he's pretty young. And obviously we'll have to keep an eye on Akers with a bigger sample size heading into next year. On the offensive line, at left tackle is going to be Walker Little. The Jaguars took him in the second round of the 2021 draft out of Stanford, with the extra second-round pick they had from the Vikings as part of the Unique Ngakoue trade before the 2020 season. And Little was basically a backup last year, kind of their swing tackle. He slipped a bit in the draft because of the injury that he suffered while at Stanford, and he might be in line for a starting role next year, either on the left or on the right side. At left guard is Casey McDermott, who has basically been a guy that's been on and off of their practice squad the past few seasons. At center is Brandon Linder, who is the longest tenured player on the Jaguars. He's been with them since 2014. Unfortunately, the last 2 years just haven't been very good for him. He's had some injuries, and he's shown a significant decline in play after a really good 2019 season. Right guard is Ben Barch, who was a fourth-round pick in 2020. He wound up taking over as the starting right guard over A.J. Cann during last season. Right tackle is Jawan Taylor, a second-round pick in 2019. Taylor has played every single snap and has started every single snap, I should say, since he was drafted. He just hasn't been consistent enough, however, and he may not be assured of a starting job this year. He might have to fend off Little for it, or maybe he gets traded in a change of scenery. We'll see what happens there. And then I have 2 receivers and 2 tight ends for them. So their 2 wide receivers are Marvin Jones Jr. and Jamal Agnew. Jones is the veteran, former Bengal, former Lion, came over to the Jags this offseason, which was somewhat of a surprising signing because he had made some comments suggesting that he wanted to sign with a team that was going to be competing for a Super Bowl, which led some people to believe that he would sign with the Rams and follow Matthew Stafford there, but instead he went to the Jaguars, and familiarity with the offense and Darrell Bevell was likely a reason for that. And he was fine. I mean, he's a decent deep threat and a good veteran option, but he's definitely not a number 1. And then Agnew was also somewhat of an interesting signing, also a former Detroit Lion. He started out his career cornerback and then was converted to a wide receiver in 2020. He's a really good return guy with maybe some untapped potential at wide receiver, but the contract they gave him was a bit larger than I think a lot of people expected. And he was mostly just a complementary piece on the offense, so certainly they'll want to upgrade at that position as well. And then 2 tight ends, they have Chris Manhertz and Dan Arnold. Manhertz was a free agent signing last year, came over from the Panthers. He's one of the better blocking tight ends in the league, while Arnold was acquired in a trade with the Carolina Panthers in the return that sent former top 10 pick C.J. Henderson to Carolina during the 2021 season. Tight end was a very weak position for the Jaguars last year, and they especially started out, and they hoped that Arnold would show some potential there, but he missed a decent chunk of the year due to injury. So we'll see if the new coaching staff in front office, I guess not front office, wants to continue that experiment, or if they want to find an upgrade there. And then they have former second-round pick Laviska Shenault at wide receiver as well, as another notable cap hit, and he had a decent-ish rookie season. We'll see if he can break out in year 3. Again, he's not listed here because his cap hit is lower than Dan Arnold's is. On the defensive side, you have Roy Robertson-Harris, Malcolm Brown, and Davon Hamilton as the defensive linemen. Robertson-Harris was a free agent signing from the Bears, and he's an okay player. Malcolm Brown was acquired in a salary dump from the New Orleans Saints, who really needed to shed cap space last year. And then Hamilton is a draft pick in 2020. So it's a fine defensive line, but could certainly use some improvement. We'll see what the Jaguars do, if they're going to stick in this 3-4 scheme or if they're going to switch to a 4-3, which is what they'd run prior to Urban Meyer. At linebacker, you've got Josh Allen, the 7th overall pick in 2019. Allen, he's somewhat rebounded from a injury-shortened sophomore season, and he was decent-ish last year. He had the game of his life against the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, with the sack and the interception, but overall just wasn't overall that great. I would guess they pick up the 5th-year option, but probably not going to start discussing an extension just yet. Inside linebacker is Myles Jack, who's also been with the team for a while, second-round pick in 2016. But since he signed that extension, he just hasn't really been the same player. He's played out of position, and you can argue maybe he played out of scheme this year. And then other middle linebacker is Shaquille Quarterman, who was a mid-round draft pick in either 2019 or 2020, who saw some playing time this year because of injuries and COVID. Other edge rusher is Dwayne Smoot. They re-signed him last offseason. He was pretty solid. Cornerback, you've got Shaquille Griffin, a big money free agent signing from the Seahawks. Griffin, I've always described as like he's a low end cornerback one. Like he's not a shutdown corner like a Tre'Davious White or a Jalen Ramsey, but he can hold his own. But he had kind of a disappointing season with the Jaguars as the number one. Their number two is Tyson Campbell, who was the first pick in the second round last year out of Georgia. Got more playing time as the season went on. And then their nickel defender is Chris Claybrooks, a seventh round pick in 2020, but he's barely played on defense. He's more of a special teams guy. And then their safeties, you got Rayshon Jenkins, who they signed in free agency coming over from the Chargers. He had a decent year, but he got injured late in the season. And then Rudy Ford, he was a free agent signing, but he was also a kind of a guy that was signed for special teams as well. On special teams, Ross Matisic is their long snapper, and I believe he's in a contract year, so he could be a guy that Jacksonville will probably want to extend. Punter Logan Cook, who was extended last offseason, and then the kicker is Matthew Wright. They kind of bounced through a couple of kickers during the season. It started out with Lambeau, but then Lambeau got cut, and then we obviously heard the report about that Urban Meyer kicked him during a practice. So we'll see what they do, if they're going to stick with Wright or if they're going to look to upgrade somewhere else. And then some other notable cap hits that I missed. You got K'Lavon Chaisson off the edge, first round draft pick in 2020. He just hasn't really been able to translate his hyper athleticism into pass rushing ability just yet, and I wonder if he could maybe be a change of scenery candidate. And then at safety, you got Andre Sisco, who notably Urban Meyer was criticized for not giving him playing time, especially later in the year with the Jaguars out of playoff contention, and he could possibly be competing to start at the safety position. So Jacksonville this year has about $59.38 million in cap space, so they're among the leaders in teams that have availability to bring in free agents there. Their potential cap casualties that they have, I would say Myles Jack and Brandon Linder are probably the two biggest ones, given that they've had struggles the past couple seasons, and that would add to the Jaguars' bounty of cap space. Carlos Hyde should be an easy cut since he was an Urban Meyer signing, and because they have James Robinson and Etienne. I guess they could potentially keep Hyde around like as injury insurance for those two guys, and then maybe like release him in like training camp or something. But I don't expect him to be on the roster for next season. And then Jamal Agnew could also be a cap casualty if they wanted to upgrade at receiver. As far as trade candidates go, I would say that Taylor and Chaisson are probably the two biggest trade candidates. I don't think they trade Taylor immediately. I would guess that they keep him and have him compete maybe with Walker Little at right tackle, and then if he loses out, maybe he gets traded to a team that needs some offensive line help before the start of the season. So going through their free agents, you've got left tackle Cam Robinson, who played under the franchise tag last year, and he had the best season of his career. There's been talks that Jacksonville might tag him again, in which case he'd be the starting left tackle for them, or in which case he'd be there, and in this case, maybe they tag him with the idea of working out a new contract. Starting left guard Andrew Norwell, former starting right guard A.J. Cann, but as mentioned before, he lost it to Barch. Former first-round pick defensive lineman Taven Bryan, edge rusher Jihad Ward, backup center Tyler Shatley, starting veteran linebacker Damian Wilson, part-time starting cornerback Trey Herndon, tight end James O'Shaughnessy, veteran corner Nevin Lawson, edge rusher Adam Gotsis, former second-round pick receiver DJ Chark. Chark has been injured most of the last couple of seasons, and he'll probably, I'm imagining, taking a one-year deal in free agency elsewhere. He has wide receiver one upside, but again, it's just a matter of him staying healthy. Veteran receiver return man Tavon Austin, edge rusher Laurenti McCray, tight end Jacob Hollister, linebacker Tyrell Adams, receiver returner Jaden Mickens, receiver Laquan Treadwell, punter J.K. Scott, who I believe he was only signed as like a COVID replacement when Cook had to miss a game because of the virus. Running back Dare Ogunbowale is a restricted free agent. Linebacker Dakota Allen is a restricted free agent. Tight end Kahali Warren is a restricted free agent. Tackle Will Richardson. Receiver Terry Godwin is an exclusive rights free agent. Linebacker Chappelle Russell is an exclusive rights free agent. Edge rusher Jameer Jones is an exclusive rights free agent. Running back Mekhi Sargent is an exclusive rights free agent. And safety Andrew Wingard is a restricted free agent. The positions of need for the Jaguars, their main position needs are definitely going to be left tackle, which again they can fill likely by just by franchising Robinson. There are other options. They could maybe take Evan Neal first overall in the draft if they wanted to. There's guys like Teron Armstead out there that are available in free agency. Also, left guard is a need. I don't see them re-signing Norwell. I would guess they probably look for a replacement, and the good news is there are a lot of guards there. With you got Mark Glowinski, you got Brandon Scherf, you got James Daniels, you got Alex Kappa. A lot of those guys play on the right side, but they could probably become left guards. I also would list center as a need, particularly if they do release Linder. Definitely wide receiver is a need. They could use some depth, and they could also use a true number one receiver. And then linebacker is a need, especially if they do end up releasing Myles Jack. But even then, they could probably use an upgrade over Shaquille Quarterman as the other linebacker. And then as far as their secondary positions of need, maybe a tight end if they see an upgrade over Arnold and Manhurts and want to get like a realistic starter there. I don't know, maybe Zach Ertz decides to come if he wants to play for Doug Pederson, although he would be on the older side. You also got you got guys like Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys, Tyler Conklin of the Vikings. That could also be available. Again, secondary needs, they're not pressing needs as in obviously the primary needs are ones that you have to fill. The secondary needs, what I define as, like, you would be okay with the guys that you have currently slated to start there, but if you have the opportunity to get a surefire upgrade either in free agency or the draft, then I'd go ahead and do it. And then cornerback, I'm assuming Clay Brooks is not going to be their starting nickelback, so they'll need another guy there. And then safety, they'll need someone. Maybe not necessarily if they want to have Andre Cisco start. I don't think they're gonna just hand him a starting job though. He'll probably have to compete with somebody. So probably a cheap free agent signing, I'm guessing. Right tackle, that depends on what they do, I guess, especially on the left side. Because if they do bring back Cam Robinson or draft Evan Neal or something, then they'll probably just have their in-house guys, Little and Taylor, battle for the right tackle job. And then kicker if they want to find somebody to upgrade over Matthew Wright. I'm sure that they can do that. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next off-season preview video.